Lateness costs businesses hundreds per employee every single year, adding up to billions in lost productivity worldwide. That's the equivalent to 97 minutes lost per person per month, with most delays caused by transport issues, poor time management, or low morale. Hi, I'm Kathy Doherty, the People Navigator. If you're running a small business or managing a small team, chronic lateness isn't just annoying, it's costing you time, morale, and clients and customers. Today, I'm going to show you simple and fair ways to tackle lateness to help your team stay on track and your business to keep running smoothly. 97 minutes might not initially sound that much, but imagine 10 employees. That's 970 minutes per month. That equals 16 hours. Or 2 8-hour working days every single month. So first of all, you're going to want to understand the why. And that begins with a quiet chat, not going in throwing around accusations. Remember, keeping the inquisitive mind. Stay curious. Begin by asking, is there something making mornings tough or more of a challenge? And this is where it depends on how well you already know your team and know your people. You're going to need to factor in the actual context for that individual. This doesn't just mean the individual themselves as long as you have known them, but you'll also want to factor in their culture. Where have they come from? Are they used to more being on Caribbean time versus being on City of London time? Factor these things in, as well as their family background, what their upbringing is, because it might not necessarily be that individual is doing this out of their own poor time management. It could be that they just generally have a more relaxed approach to being on time and what that means. We all have that friend, where I'm just giggling because I'm not going to mention her name, where I will always refer to, well, that's that time, but that's so-and-so's time. And similar with my dad, if we want him to leave at a certain time, to be ready at a certain time, we give him a deadline half an hour earlier. And you will have those people in your team. So understanding the context, understanding their specific circumstances. It will also be important for you to understand, is the lateness occasional? Is it a pattern? How frequently is it happening? Is it your perception? Maybe on days when you're a little bit more short-tempered, what are the actual facts as opposed to your perception? And how often is it happening? What are the fact-based, evidence-based patterns to support the whole reason for having the conversation? If you've been following my advice, then you will know the importance of building up trust and trusted connections with your people. And having an empathetic approach really helps with that. And you're wanting to identify and differentiate between the employee, where it could be circumstances, it could be culture, it could be genuine circumstances, versus the uncaring employee, which is a very different character, and you need a different approach. However, you begin with the same approach. You begin by being curious. And after that conversation, you then set clear expectations, not threats. For them, they need to maybe understand the consequences of what that lateness means. For them, they might be, oh, sure, it's only a couple of minutes. What does that matter? It doesn't really have that much of an impact. And this is where your education bit needs to come in, because showing somebody, explaining to them that they can understand the impact of that lateness. Say, for example, your working day begins at 9 o'clock. That's when your clients and customers are expecting your service to be available. If that individual is late, they then are putting the onus on their colleagues to be available if that was their responsibility, to be able to deliver that service. That's going to be very annoying, irritating, and grating on their colleagues over the longer period. It also reflects badly on that individual as a person if they're the one who is always late and it's always their colleagues having to pick up the slack. At some point, their colleagues will have had enough. Also the impact on, say, if you have contracts and you have service level agreements, you're having to divert resources from where they need to be to cover that person who was late. That can potentially impact over a period of time on your service level agreements or your commitments, your simple commitments to your clients and customers that this is the kind of service that they should expect and that you fulfill and that this matters to you. Remember, those 97 minutes per employee per month adds up to 2 8-hour working days every single month. And this is only about lateness. This isn't sickness absence. This isn't holidays. This isn't about planned and unplanned absences. This is lateness alone. So instead of saying punctuality really matters to team flow, what does that even mean? Go into the specifics, help them paint the picture as to what the actual impact is. And then get specific when it comes to what does punctuality, what does being on time mean? So if your working day starts, say, at 9 o'clock in the morning, what does being available to start work at 9 o'clock in the morning look like? Because people will arrive into work. When they're physically arriving into the workspace, they will then be making maybe their teas, coffees, getting their water, getting themselves set up for the day. They're not actually beginning work. This can depend on whether they're having work-based conversations as they're doing all of that, but define what that means for that person in their role. When their working time begins, what does that mean? You're not teaching your granny to suck eggs. What you're doing is not making assumptions about what people understand by the terms that you use. Again, you're factoring in the context of that individual, not just how long you have known them, but potentially a whole family, upbringing, history, culture, all of those influences on what timekeeping means and how important it is. And the smaller your business, the bigger the impact lateness will have. And then once you've had that conversation, you've set the expectations, not the threats, then implement light accountability. You're not talking about a hammer to crack a nut. Whether you start with some sort of simple login activity, and this is more about raising their awareness, bringing it to the fore, that it's not hidden anymore and it's not assumed, you're making it visible, you're making it impossible for them to ignore. And it's not about attaching shame, this is about a behavioural change. You're wanting to encourage them to change these habits. It's not about punishment. And this is where you're wanting to track the patterns, that you're not being disproportionate, that it is a pattern. You've got some sort of traction behind it. And you're also factoring in where things are out of that person's control. Say if there's a transport strike and they're using public transport, or there's something that surprises, severe weather, something that is unexpected. You can then factor that in because life is unexpected. And then where possible, you may want to consider offering flexible solutions. If you operate a shift pattern, are there opportunities for them to start a bit earlier or a bit later? But it's not down to their planning. It could be that maybe they're dropping children off at daycare. It could be that they have to go and look after an elderly parent. They have to check in on them at a certain time, or that person needs medication at a particular time. Understand the context. However, be mindful that you're not creating a precedent, a first-time agreement that another employee might reasonably expect to request. Also, the type of flexibility you offer will be highly dependent on the employee we're talking about. Are they somebody who has also shown mutual flexibility, or are they the type who are so rigid, offer no flexibility, yet expect it all? They expect to be given everything without giving anything in return. That will be a big factor in how willing you are to be flexible, to show flexibility. Keep in mind how that may cloud your judgment or make that part of the conversation. To the kind of person who says, actually, I maybe wasn't as effective during the day, I'm having to work a bit later because I kind of got distracted with that during the day and I didn't really focus on what I needed to focus. Those sorts of people you work with. The type of people who won't work with you, you're going to be more cautious about showing them flexibility because they're the takers. And then finally, recognize any improvements. Reinforce it positively. I'm not talking about being patronizing. Yeah, you arrived in on time. Woo, go you. None of that. That's a bit over the top, a bit insincere. But a quick thanks, quiet words, say, look, you've put the effort in, and I do appreciate the effort that is, and I just want to make sure that that keeps going. But if there is an occasional hiccup, we're not going to let that set us back. Just keep doing what you're doing because it's working and I'm appreciating it, and your colleagues are appreciating it too. People will respond more to the positive encouragement rather than criticism. If dealing with lateness is draining your energy and your clients, choose one of these steps to try this week. Let me know how it goes in the comments below, and if you want more assistance with your people's behaviour, get in touch. See you next time.